Welcome to the Rebel Rebel. I'm your host, Michael Dargie. The Rebel Rebel is a show dedicated to creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. It's a love letter to those people who think audaciously and act courageously in service of making the world a better and more interesting place.
I got to a point where I was just like, okay, I got to stop complaining and do something about it. It's not even about the facts. Like, people don't even really care about the facts. It's really about the ineffective communication. We're not going to punish anybody as long as they don't violate the terms for bad comments. But what we do is we reward people for good comments.
Today's guest has this crazy idea to help constructive discourse worldwide. How hard would it be to change the way we consume information and interact with viewpoints that are different from our own? We're going to find out and dive right in. Welcome Amir Sheik, the founder of Ponderly, to the RebelRebel podcast. Amir, how the hell are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Michael. I'll give you a quick maybe elevator pitch here to save some time. But I back in right before COVID, I was already thinking about it, a little frustrated with friends and family and society with the divisiveness, and just vitriol that I saw everywhere. And I got to a point where I was just like, okay, I got to stop complaining and do something about it. COVID helped a little, obviously kind of containing us. And so I started 4B. And then I think through testing and, going through that process, rebranded to Ponderly. And, here we are today. So Ponderly is a platform. We're on Google Play Store, Apple Store, and we have a website as well. And we produce original content, which is unique in that we bring perspectives from both sides. So it is very different because every other platform out there basically just says, trust me, I'm telling you the truth, and you're getting a good summary from me. And we use a different approach, in just like I said, where we say, no, well, we're going to give you the left side or the right side, or it doesn't even have to be political. It could be sports. It could be from the losing team and the winning team. And, we're expecting the user to take that and then make informed decisions. So we are neutral as a platform.
Wow. Okay. So because I'm new to this whole thing, so I was checking it out, and I've got it on this other screen over here. So the idea is, let me just recapture what you said there, is that you can have this idea like let me use this one because I just saw this. Is the NFL rigged? So this is like a conversation people have all the time. And there's some weird stuff I saw online that says, oh, it's totally rigged. And there's some weird video of some guys saying it was blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So you basically put up this poll is what it amounts to. You've got two dissenting or contrasting viewpoints. One person says, yes, it is, and here's the reasons why. Another person says, no, it isn't, and here's the reasons why. And then you give people the opportunity to weigh in for what they believe and add comments. So it basically adds to the conversation.
Kind of.
Okay.
You're very close.
Okay.
So we actually, it was pretty close. It was an interesting way you presented it. But yeah, no, we produce the content itself, but we do have a pulse, so we know, like, people are talking about, is the NFL rigged? So we have actually a real article. We have fact boxes, which we kind of curate. And then we source the writers for both sides. And then the user on the app, basically, if they're interested in that, they click on it, they read through both sides, and then they can, poll and comment and such. I think it's something that we have 13 categories. Sports is one of them that you just mentioned. And so, our job is to make sure that we're in the know in those categories, and we have, writers that know what's trending and what people are talking about. And then we try to come up with prompts within that. Now, the reason I kind of mentioned try is that it's a lot more difficult than it seems. There's a few kind of barriers. The first one is not everything is interesting, controversial. I know everything potentially could be, but not very much. And so, is it okay to innocently kill people, for example? Kill innocent people. Most people will not say it's okay, right? So it's not really a debate. And I gave you an extreme example, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of topics out there that people they're not interested in. So you can't just ask a question. And even within an interesting topic, you have to really have an angle that there can be two clear sides.
Okay.
Because a lot of things today, especially, are very complicated. And if you don't have two clear sides, then you don't even know which side you want to take, because both sides have kind of a point. And so it definitely is a challenge. I think going through this process is understanding, how people think, and how to present something that's easy to associate with, and understand which side to be on.
Wow. So I mean, I want to learn more about Ponderly. I like deep dive, but I am passionately curious about you as a person, and what is it that drove you to build this thing.
Yeah, I think. Okay.
No, I was going to say, let's go back in time, do a little time travel. And it doesn't have to be like you were just sitting around with a buddy one day. Like, what actually happened? Like, what did you see that caused you to go this way?
Yeah, and I'm comfortable sharing this specifically example, and we can go in more depth if you need to. But I think it happened over many moons. I would say probably a couple of decades, and I'll give this one very, very specific example because it's important to me. But I grew up a little bit more conservative, I think,
Okay.
and I still have a lot of the conservative values. But one of the things I was very adamantly against, homosexuality specifically, even though it didn't affect me in any way, it didn't affect my life in any way. I just had that view because of the environment and all those things. And I think there was not one moment that I can say, now, you know what? I'm not against it. It doesn't bother me. If people want to live that lifestyle or have those partners, like, it has nothing to do with me. And, I should be supportive of them just like I support heterosexual couples.
Sure.
There was not a moment. But I think when I look back at my life, there were plenty of people through the years that said things to me and said, "Hey, Amir, like, why are you so against it? What has somebody done something to you? Is somebody making you do something?" And I think if I count those conversations, there might have been, a lot over the years.
Sure.
And I think it's the accumulation of all of those conversations, the time, my growth, my other life experiences, that eventually I kind of slowly, came around to, yeah, you know what? It has nothing to do with me, and it's, your reasons for saying that it's bad or not valid, and all the other things, I think, came along over time. And that's really what I think is to bring it back to your original question, is what happened with Ponderly as well, because I obviously am human. I have my own personal views on a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Some of them more stronger than others. And I think over time I realized that, life is not that simple. Most people are not evil and good. Most people are not dumb or intelligent. We're all kind of a combination of those. And depending on what topic we're talking about, we could be, more on one side on something and the other. It's just very complicated. And, when I dug even further, I found that a lot of the conflict that we have, in society, it's not even about the facts. Like, people don't even really care about the facts. It's really about the ineffective communication. And that's what it comes down to, is that I'm not able to communicate effectively to you that, the NFL is not rigged. And you believe it because you saw one or two things, and from your perspective, it looked true. And so you're not going to listen to anything else, that you made your mind up. And if we were able to sit in a room and have like a long conversation uninterrupted, and you respected me, I respected you, we might not necessarily change our opinion, but I think we might not think the other side is like evil and we need to like rid them of this world, and that's really, as funny as that is, that's where a lot of people are today. It's like, what? Oh, you don't believe what I believe on this law. You shouldn't even be living,
Right.
or you shouldn't even, and it's just, we take it to such extreme levels, and I don't think we need to go into the consequences of that, but that's harmful for society. It's harmful for us as individuals. It's harmful for us as, for our children, and so on and so forth. And so I think for me, it's like, instead of trying to fight like fire with fire, is say, okay, well, let's find a way to get people together, where we can not force each other to change our minds, not, shove things down each other's throat, but just say, hey, let me just hear what you have to say. And maybe afterwards, I even believe myself even more. That's fine. But I can respect you as a human, and I respect that you're not a bad person. And you see things differently for a wide variety of reasons.
Wow. That's very noble pursuit, by the way. I think that giving a space to have actual conversations is amazing, and certainly very timely in today's day and age.
Definitely.
If I were to I guess ask this question: how many problems do you have on the platform with people coming in with very hot takes on their side, and is it respectful? How do you protect your users? Like, I'm curious about all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So right now, we've been spending greater than 95% of our resources, time, et cetera, on back-end development. And so we do kind of focus groups and other things, but for the most part, we're working on development, and including content. I think that, right now, we're looking to focus on engagement. So not necessarily numbers. I think the numbers thing is going to be the next step. So once we kind of flush out some of these, some of the bugs, some of these, essentially what we're trying to do is we're getting you the right ingredients. So, we take things from like TikTok or Instagram or some of the media, and we see things that work and we put them together. But it's not only the ingredients. It's like, which order do you put it in? How do you present it? And so we're focused on that. But I think with the content moderation, I think was one of your questions. It's interesting. So for us, like the First Amendment is really, really important that we mirror that as much as possible. So, unless you're making a threat to another user or anything illegal or anything that wouldn't be covered under the First Amendment, we're going to allow it. That's our personal view. When you go on the App Store or when you go on the Google Play Store, when you submit for an app, it's very restrictive, especially for someone like us, because we do have obviously user-generated content.
Yeah.
And so they actually put a lot of limitations on us on top of that because it's their platform. I mean, it's their marketplace, right?
Right.
And so if we want to do business on their marketplace, they said, hey, so we actually have to do things such as we have to monitor, content. We have to have like a flag. We have to have like block options and various kind of scenarios. And there's all kinds of things that they make us do. So even if I didn't want to do it, it's just, and before you get approval to be on there or to do an update, they check for that. And so if it's not there, they're just not going to approve you.
Interesting.
But yeah, just going back to us as a platform, our kind of ethos, we're focused on First Amendment, and I think even the dumb ideas, I think they have some value. We just might not see it, but if people, however, and I say dumb like with quotes because
Sure.
but however dumb or ignorant or hurtful you think somebody's comments or views are, if enough people feel that way, there's a reason, right? And I think instead of sweeping it under the rug or instead of demonizing the group, I think the better route to do is to understand and to work with that group, right? And ultimately we should all be working together, for everyone's benefit. And if we demonize or we ignore, or we shut down or censor, I think in my mind, I don't see how that's bringing people together.
Wow. It's not a small platform then that you've created. Like, have you experienced any backlash about it or?
No, I mean through the so even up to now, like we've been rebranding, we've been developing and making changes. So through that process, yes, there's definitely been it, but the backlash has mostly been because I've been involved with a lot of the users, with feedback or focus groups. So I hear things, and the number one thing I hear from every side, whatever the position, is that, Amir, I can't believe you allowed this to be said. Like, I can't believe you allowed this to be said. And I have learned to be very neutral, and so I don't tell the other person that, hey, well, actually, you said this, and that's actually pretty bad too. I don't say that because, again, it's not helping the situation. But for me, it's more like I need people to, or I want people to understand that without it being like, I got you, or I won the conversation. See, you were wrong too. That's not an effective way. Even if you're right, if you humiliate, whether overtly or inadvertently, you're just not going to get that person to change, and you're not going to get that person to admit they were wrong or make any positive changes. And so you have to do it in a way where they realize, just like I gave you, my personal example where I realized on my own. I had countless people tell me that this was wrong and none of your business and all of those things. But until I realized on my own, that was the only way, I changed. And I think most people, they operate the same way.
So and maybe this is an oversimplification. Are you saying that this is kind of like a safe space for conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting way. I never heard it in those words, but yeah, I would say it's a safe place, for conversations. A couple of things we've done, and that are coming down the pipeline as well as gamification. We're introducing, so it's we're not gonna punish anybody as long as they don't violate the terms for bad comments. But what we do is we reward people for good comments, and
Ah,
so if you make a comment, for example, and you get enough users that like that comment, you'll get reward points for that. And
gotcha.
so you're basically incentivized now to make productive comments. And so those are the types of things that we're integrating into the platform because we are personally very against censorship and controlling people and controlling people what they think. Our strategy is more the really nice restaurant strategy where the rules in a really nice restaurant and a McDonald's are likely not very off, but people behave differently. And the same people that would go to that McDonald's will save differently, will behave differently, they'll sit differently, they'll talk differently, all of those things, even though the rules are pretty much the same. And so the reason for that obviously is, the people that are there, the decor, there's all these factors that,
Mhm.
and so the restaurant isn't forcing you to sit a certain way or to behave or all that, but you kind of can control that environment. So we're kind of bringing that same logic to this is that, we can't stop trolls or we can't stop people from just being hateful, for no productive reason. But I think if we do some of these things like the gamification, for example, the other way is like how we kind of structure the articles and how we have like the fact like there's a number of things that we do that is equivalent to analogy of a nice restaurant. Then you have less of it.
Right.
Nice restaurants have bad people too or bad patrons too, but it's less likely than I'm assuming than like a McDonald's.
That's fair. I think that's a fair assumption.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. How do you determine what is a fact?
Yeah. Good question. I think when we determine what is a fact, so we have a fact box in every article,
Yeah. See
and
that.
that's curated by us and our editors, and even us. We check ourselves, and we do that by having multiple people check each other, and we do have a process as well. And that's a very good question. Like to be 100% on anything is not possible.
Right.
And I'm talking about issues like this. Like there's some things like 1+1 is 2. It's going to be difficult. But when you're talking about social issues or like sports or things like on a call, it's very difficult to get depending on what it is down to 100% accuracy. But I think what we can do, how we're better, is that we're closer to the truth. I think than many others. So when you have, like when you have a fact that, let's say, let me see something that's not too controversial. But if you make the statement, for example, are there two genders, right?
Right.
Versus if you make a statement like, are there two sexes, for example, or a variation of those things. There's obviously a lot of people who are very, very strong, who feel very strongly about that specific topic.
Right.
And I think the way that we try to present it in our fact box is that instead of saying there are two genders or there are more than two genders, we will pick a fact that might be a variation that's not controversial that can address that. So somewhere in
Sure.
there. So we will say something like, Dr. Michael in 1972 did a study and this is what it showed. So we're not saying that, this is true, this is false. So we'll try to make like an objective kind of fact, like in between,
Yeah.
and still kind of addressing it, but and kind of dancing around, because it's very important for us, especially as we build this brand and we build this platform. If we're creating our own content, we have to have credibility, and that credibility is very difficult to earn. It's very easy to lose. On one little thing, you can lose all credibility, and so we have to make sure that we go by the process that we've established internally. Even then, we have multiple checks and balances, and then I look at it at the end as well from a kind of a neutral chrome, just to make sure like nothing slipped through. And sometimes things do. And when I look at it, most of the time they're not direct or overt. They're just like, oh, that was a simple mistake or whatever. But those things to me are very important that we stay neutral.
Interesting. Is it so? And this is me getting into the weeds just because I'm interested,
Yeah.
and I tend to follow the questions. But I'm looking at your fact box here, and this one I'm looking at, just so you know, it's is the student loan forgiveness, Biden.
Got it.
And in the fact box, it has these facts, which is really cool. That NerdWallet reports that over 43 million Americans have outstanding student debt. Easy to check. Have you thought of having a, challenge this fact opportunity for somebody to be like, no, dude, that's not right at all. As a matter of fact, it's this.
You mean more like a, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering if each one of these facts could be, if I could be like, oh, I have some special knowledge and this is clearly not what I know as a fact. I'd like to submit that to you.
Yeah.
For
yeah, I think, and good question. No, I mean, as we've been developing, all of these ideas have come across, and essentially like the Wikipedia equivalent almost, where, you can come in and contribute or, make changes or.
I don't want to change. I think that would be a recipe for disaster. I'd just like to send it for moderation, to be like,
Yeah, so you're welcome to, and anybody's welcome to, like in the comments, just say, hey, a Ponderly, like, I think this fact is off, or,
Gotcha.
This fact is better or whatever. And we definitely look at those. So,
great.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this is it.
The way we have our system in the setup back, I'm like, if someone gets flagged or blocked or whatever, like we get separate, we have tracking for everything. So we're definitely on top of it.
That's cool. This is a really fascinating thing. I'm excited for you to put this out into the world and see what happens. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and right now we're starting to reach out to investors. I think while we're going through this engagement process where we're getting direct feedback from random people and focus groups and all of those things and making adjustments on the fly, I think when we can get that ingredient right, the perfect ingredient where we have all the great features from social platforms, from media content that people want to see, at that point we're just going to scale. And I think a lot of the things we're building internally, not only with the development, but also like the fact boxes and the editing, the sourcing of writers, like all of those things, we're probably not as efficient as we would in the short term, because we're looking at that long term scalability, and so that way we can just hit the switch and kind of grow. But it's really, really exciting times, but it's very stressful. It's a lot of work. If you think you can do this without working 7 days a week or working late nights, it's just not humanly possible. So I would say it's like, when you have a new kid, you don't get to sleep, and you have to go through all this, but in the end it's worth it.
Right.
Most of the time. So
growing pains.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Where are you in the world ish? You don't have to give me your
in Southern California. We're in Southern California. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you're in Southern California.
Yep.
Are you close to the ocean or no?
Depends what you consider close, but probably an hour away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of some sort of landmark. I don't know what things are. I'm assuming. I mean, it's a desert, right? There's some palm trees kicking around. It's
yeah, we definitely have some palm trees, and we brought in a lot of water, so it's hard to recognize that we're in a desert.
Right. So I guess one of the questions I like to ask, or I like to put you in this spot where you're walking down your favorite street, whatever that happens to be. Maybe it's cobblestone, maybe it's not. Maybe there's skateboarders, maybe, I don't know. It doesn't matter, but there's palm trees. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's SoCal. And you're thinking to yourself, there's just one thing I wish the world knew. What is that? What is that thing for you?
And you're asking if I was able to communicate to everybody instantly?
Like,
okay.
What is like, what do you think about? What are you just like, oh man, I wish, and sometimes it's be like, you know what? Pineapple does belong on pizza. I wish people just knew that and got over it.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, and I don't know if I have like a one-word answer. Does it have to be a one-word answer? Okay.
No.
I think for me, it's more, I wish people knew if we could all work together in a productive way, it would benefit all of us so much more than if all of us work individually or for our own interests. And that doesn't mean necessarily individual interests, but group interests or identity interests. Like if we just all work together, we would already have the cure for cancer. All these things that we complain about, homelessness, all these, they would be gone. Like it's not, those things are not problems because we don't have the ability. Those things are problems because of us, because of our limitations and our fighting and lack of effective communication, like I mentioned, and all of those things. So that's what hurts me most. if you tell me, hey, Amir, like, I should have played in the NBA, I couldn't. Like, at no point in my life could I have, because I didn't have the ability. So there's nothing for me to be angry about, right?
Right.
Because I never had it. But if you said, hey, Amir, you should have played in that second grade basketball team and won, then yeah, I should have, because obviously and so that's really where I kind of see the world, is that we're just shooting ourselves in the foot, like, all day,
Yeah.
and it's hurtful, because we're all suffering, as a result. So that's what I would like to communicate first, is like for people to realize that. And then I don't know if this is kind of a second part. It's just I would say, like, say sorry. To say sorry. I mean, a lot of us, and I'm saying myself included, I think if we were just to go and just say sorry to a few people that that deserve it, I think some of that might be a starting point to that solution, where like a lot of us, they cut people out of your life, or they're unproductive because of that resentment, and that like, hey, and doesn't mean that, hey, I did it on purpose or intentionally. It could have been a situational, but it hurt that person, and that stuff again becomes over time it festers, and it just becomes unhealthy, and that's what we see. So I would say, like, if you could say sorry to like 3 people that you cared about at one time, or you were close to, and you'll you're very likely, with most of them, you'll see them change, and you'll see them at least make an effort, like, oh, you know what, that was really hurtful, but thank you, that means a lot, that you did that. And so for me, it's about bringing people together, because I think people together can do some amazing things, and people apart, we're super limited.
That's awesome. That's a first for this show. That's lovely. Thanks, Amir.
Yep. No, it's important.
What do you do just for Amir? Like, you're raising this app called Ponderly, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But what do you do just for you?
It's a little less than 24 hours, but yeah, I mean, I think I have a family. I have kids. I have a business that I work in as well outside of this, and there's a few other organizations. There's a bunch of things that I do. I think I kind of made a concerted effort a few years ago to say, and a lot of it had to do with talking with the people a lot older than myself and learning from them, and consistently when I talk to them, the things that they regret, or the things that they talk about, have nothing to do with short-term or materialistic things, or, things that are day to day. And, that's one thing I really, really learned. And so I think a lot of the times, when I am overwhelmed or a lot going on, I kind of look back at, and I have to stop myself and say, okay, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, I'm not going to remember this, right? But I'm going to remember, like, did I make a difference in this? Or, did me, helping this person or working with this person or whatever that is, like, that's what is going to be important and remember. And that really is what is important. It's not only what I feel. And so I think, that's really important to me. Like, it does suck sometimes, when you're working a lot, or when you have a lot on your plate. It's not even necessarily the physical work, because that goes away. It's more the burden and the stress that I think that's carried.
Right.
And you can do things to mitigate that, and I do things to mitigate that, but we're all human. I'm not going to pretend here and say, hey, I can just swipe off stress like it's nothing. No,
Yeah.
I think some people are better at it than others, but all of us, if you're human and you breathe and you bleed, you're gonna deal with stress, and it's just you have to balance those things in life, and you have to look at where you are in life and what you want, and what your goals are. And so maybe 10 or 20 years ago, if you asked me, I would have given you a different answer, and then 10 or 20 years from now, I'd probably give you a different answer, and those answers might be correct at those points in my life.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Do you have time to read?
I only read like nonfiction, like informative, or like articles or things that are quick. I just don't have enough time to sit down and like read a book.
Yeah.
And I have never been a book reader. I think back in school I was forced to, and I really didn't like it. And so it's not something that I do. I like to get to, like, what's the point, or like, what am I trying to ascertain kind of mentality.
Yeah.
I know there's good and bad with that, but that's how I am. And so It's just the limit. I read every day, but it's like I said, it's articles or things that that I'm looking for answers specifically.
What are your thoughts on AI right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for us, it's an interesting conversation I've been having internally as well, because we source actual writers that are qualified and do work, and
which is awesome.
When I look
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it is. But when you look at AI, it's still not there yet, especially for what we're doing. However, it's definitely bridging the gap, and it's bridging it quickly. And if it continues to grow exponentially, it won't be long until they'll be outpacing humans. I think it's interesting, and it's not only going to affect us. Obviously, it's going to affect everybody. I kind of look at it, like in this way, where if you look at an artist, a musician, and you see them, perform, on a track digitally, it's flawless, it's perfect, everything is flawless. But if people have a choice to listen to their favorite artists, at home in their speaker, or hear them at a concert where they're going to cough or, take breaks, water breaks, and make flaws, and, all of that, most people will prefer the concert, and they prefer the flaws. And that's the human part of it. I think that we have that. I don't see that going away. And I think that, and today AI is valuable and will become more valuable because the efficiency and productivity gains are going to far outpace any human. However, if all of us have perfectly efficient, perfectly productive lives, that doesn't equate to human happiness. And so I think that's where I think there's going to be an equilibrium. There's going to be a balance. So it's only going to get to a certain level. Now, if I don't have to, take out the trash, or I don't have to do certain things, then yeah, that's not going to, have a significant effect. But as soon as you start getting into like writing all my emails or my thoughts, or, where I don't have to do anything or think or anything, then you kind of have to question, like, what's my purpose, or like, what are we doing? And am I getting satisfaction or happiness? And so there's some biological stuff that kind of gets into it. And so that's why I think that I'm not worried in the sense that it's going to take everything to that level, because there's that human thing. But from where we are today and to that efficient level, like, there's a lot of space between. And I don't know, judging from how we got through COVID and all the other things in the past, like, I don't know if we're capable of managing that as a society. We're just very, we're too big, and there's too many players, and I just don't know how that's going to play. So I'm more concerned with again, going back to the human part of it, of how we're going to manage that, how we're going to, regulate that or not, and, so on and so forth. But I think, for a long term, I don't think that we're going to get to perfect efficiency, because, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want, to not be able to think or use my creativity, or even there is a beauty in making mistakes. There's a beauty in falling short. Like, if you want to win at everything and not lose, then, maybe there are some people, I don't know, but I'm not that way. And so that's where I feel like there's going to be, some equilibrium and some ceiling for AI at some point. So that's my personal view.
Yeah, I dig it. I find, like, for myself and what we're seeing on our side, like, not just on the show, but like just in our creative agency that we run, is we're using it for education. We're using it to level up what we need to know, or new technology or new things. Like, it is an incredible tool for learning stuff. And I don't know if you've seen Perplexity yet, but it's next level. So it'll go out and, find answers to things, but also cite those answers, so that you've got, an actual frame of reference to be like, oh, okay, this is 5 things I need to know, and it's all corroborated. But yeah, I agreed. I don't want perfect, like, at all. The struggle's the fun.
Yeah. I think so, like, on our development, we have a development team, and I think for them, it's cut a lot of time in writing, like, remedial code that,
it's a code machine for sure.
Yeah. But if it's basic stuff, it's fine. But something more complex, it's not there yet. And, there's that into it. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting future here, and it's moving very, very quickly. So, we'll to be continued there.
Right on. If you were to, you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup guy. If you were to give, I call them rebels in waiting, maybe somebody who's like Amir, who's like, oh, I've got this great idea for a thing. the next best whatever it happens to be, what would be your advice to that person?
In the startup community specifically?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's somebody who's like you, who's about to do a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I think the first thing before whatever that idea is that you got to know what you're doing and you got to know that market, like before anything. Like it doesn't, you can be successful in any market, anything you do, if you know what you're doing and you know the good, the bad, the bogeys, like all of that, you can be successful in anything. So that's what I would say first. I think, and I know I've made this mistake where I first try to solve a problem where I think it's a problem, or I try to get into something because I think it's going to be the next best thing. But we live, especially in the information where we have a lot of information. Like, find out for sure if that is a thing. Don't go by your gut. Don't go by your intuition. Use your gut for day to day. But when you look at something that drastic, where you're going to invest time, money, resource, all that into something, get the answer first and then back into it and say, okay, like, wow, I did some, focus groups, or I did some, all this stuff. And I know for sure, like, if I do this, there's definitely a demand there. Once you have that demand, then those little nuances and navigating and stuff, that's all hard work and dedication and, working up, late night hours. That's all you need to be prepared for that regardless, but you don't want to waste your time, getting, basically, you don't want to waste your time on getting something, a very small return from a very big investment. And I'm trying to think of an analogy, but I think the point is made there. And so I think too many people, including myself, have done that, where it's like, we're very wishful and we really want something and we think this is the best thing, but we don't really know. And we're just going based off of our intuition and our gut, or maybe even our immediate circle that we're surrounded with. And a lot of times people don't realize your immediate circle a lot of times are people who think like you as well. So it's not as diverse as you think.
Right.
And so sometimes to get that knowledge, you have to go after people you might not like, or you don't agree with, or you don't have the same lifestyle, and get kind of their input before you dig into it.
Oh, dude, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's what I would say first is, like, make sure it's something that's a real problem. Make sure it's something that, there's a huge potential and a huge upside in. And a lot of times when you start to go through that journey, you'll find that in most cases, there's not as much upside as it looks, because you're not and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but all of us, we're not the smartest. I know we all think we're the smartest. I know we think we're the highest moral person. We're the best at, whatever we do, but you're likely not. Right. And so, just if it's very unlikely that you came up with something that, nobody else thought of. Now, it might be something that you came up with and you're in a position to take advantage of that situation, and you move quickly enough that you can take advantage of it. Yeah. But, it's one of those things that, and again, all these things that I'm saying, these are things that I've thought of. So I'm not saying it like, other people think that way, but it's just one of those things. You got to put it in perspective. We're all, generally smart. We're all generally good. We're all generally, want to do better for ourselves. And so, what makes you any better than, the person next to you? And the answer to that question is your hard work and ethic is really what makes you better, because that is one factor that you have 100% control over, is how hard you work, how much you put into something. Your intelligence, your ability, like, you can only, especially for an adult, you can only do so much. But your work ethic, you can really outwork a lot of people out there, if you really want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is something that you've got complete control over. I didn't invent this phrase at all, but I always figure that if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
That's definitely a good point. And yeah, I mean, I think the intelligence thing, to me, I know a lot of people that I talk to feel differently, but to me, intelligence is actually not something you can affect, right? You can affect your knowledge, you can affect, process, you can affect certain things, but intelligence to me is like processing power. So I didn't get smarter as I got older. I got more knowledge, right? And I got more experiences, but my intelligence, is what it is. Yeah. I just had, when I was 18, I had the same brain. It's just I didn't have any knowledge to process, or enough knowledge to base it off of. So I think that's where I kind of focus more on, like, I'm not saying do the brain exercises or read and all that, but get the knowledge. But I think sometimes people focus too much and then they stress over things like, this person's better at this. Okay. Yeah, that's right. People are better than you at certain things.
Yeah,
okay. So
that's great.
Why stress on it? Yeah. Don't focus on the things that you can't control. Focus on, that person, got off work at 7, you can work till 10.
Yeah.
You can control that instead of stressing about why this person is better than you at something.
I watched an interview with Kobe Bryant who talked about waking up at 4:00 in the morning. And basically the long story short is that he ended up with an extra 1 or 2 extra practices per day above his teammates. So
Absolutely.
He basically said that he had twice the background that his teammates did by the time, at the same amount of time they had.
Right. Exactly.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, if you look at like Shaquille O'Neal, he would have been, he was obviously a great player, did some great things, but he would have been at, the untouchable status if he had the same work ethic as Kobe Bryant.
Oh,
and, Allen Iverson, like a bunch of these guys that, and we're just talking about basketball now, but applies everywhere.
Yeah.
That, people that, Barry Sanders, I personally like him a lot. And, I think he could have, put up obviously much better results and to a level where, Emmitt Smith or any of these guys couldn't touch him if he really wanted to. But that's where it kind of goes back to is that for me, I focus on what I can control. And if I can't control it, I'm not saying, and I'm not going to pretend like I don't stress about it. It sucks. It hurts when somebody is better or somebody does things better. But I try not to dwell on that and focus more on things that I can control.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one last question for you, and that is, what is something that you haven't done yet that you're going to do soon? So maybe learn to scuba dive. Maybe it's I have no idea. But I'm wondering if you're one of those people that has this thing in their head that's just like, okay, this is the next thing I'm going to do.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything short term. I think with this startup specifically, it takes up so much of my time. I don't even have time to plan on something like that. I think long term, down the line, I could definitely give you a couple of things that I'd like to do. But in the short term, I just don't have the the processing power, that definitely the time to kind of consider it. But yeah, I mean, for me, it really, really breaks my heart, when I see, like specifically kids, I'm not saying adults don't matter, but when they're suffering. And I think for me is, being able to be in a position where I can do something effectively. And when I say effectively, that doesn't mean like give them food or give them short-term shelter. I mean like, permanently change kind of the situation or make sure that doesn't happen. So that would be something that I would, that's something important to me. And hopefully, soon in life, I'll be in a position where I can, focus on that or work on some capacity at that level.
That's wicked. Amir, this has been just a huge treat. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. It's definitely a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise. I've been your host, Michael Dargie, and this has been the RebelRebel podcast. It's a podcast for creative rebels and entrepreneurs all over the world. And hey, if you're a rebel or you know a rebel, why don't you head on over to the RebelRebelPodcast.com and fill out our guest request form. We'll get back to you within 24 hours, and maybe we can share your story with the world. Don't forget to like, share, or subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And thanks so much for listening. Until next time.